Greetings, friends, and a blessed Easter Sunday to you all. In the Christian calendar, we traditionally focus on the resurrection today, but sometimes it feels like we jump to this too abruptly after the Good Friday remembrance of the death and suffering of Jesus. And for some of us who are in a time of difficulty, this can feel like a rushed or artificial attempt at buoyancy. And some of us are being called into an extended time of difficulty and waiting. And so this morning I invite us to pause for a while and to remember the time in between, the time of the tomb, which is a time of waiting and darkness in the mystery of becoming. To Jesus' companions, this must have been a time of deep despair and loss of faith. So much so that we're told in John's Gospel that some of them went back to their fishing, which was their previous way of life that they had left to follow Jesus. And although this time of waiting in darkness and uncertainty is difficult, at the end of this time of waiting comes new life, the resurrection. But it doesn't follow our timetable. And the emergence of new life is never on our terms or within our capacity to manufacture or even imagine. The cycle of death, waiting, and life emerging is also echoed in the image Jesus described before his own death in John 12, verse 24 to 25, where he said, "Unless a grain of wheat is buried in the ground, dead to the world, 'tis never any more than a grain of wheat. But if it is buried, it sprouts and reproduces itself many times over." Sue Monk Kidd wrote a wonderful book called When the Heart Waits, and she writes so beautifully about this time of waiting that I'm going to be quoting quite a bit from this book during this talk. She describes this cycle as separation, transformation, and emergence. And she writes, by repeatedly entering the spiral of separation, transformation, and emergence, we're brought closer each time to wholeness and the true self. We live in a time and culture that values quick fixes and instant solutions. And as an impatient person, I know all about this. And Cynthia Bourgeois has said that our time scale for hope is far too short. We want God to come in like a fairy godmother with a magic wand and fix things that are broken overnight. And we haven't really been taught how to recognize and value the call to a time of waiting. And this is a loss because this time of waiting in uncertainty between death and resurrection, between separation and emergence, is a crucial time. We need to learn the importance and the art of waiting. This time of waiting is not only for us individually, but also for our collective transformation. In her wonderful book titled See No Stranger, Valerie Kaur wrote, "What if this darkness is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? What if our country is not dead, but a country that is waiting to be born?" And this offers a wonderful sense of promise in these times that do fill us with despair for our own beloved country, but also for the world that seems so deadened to suffering, poverty, and injustice. And so a good place to begin when learning the art of waiting is to look at nature. Here we don't see an instantaneous movement from conception to birth, from planting a seed to the seedling popping up from the ground, or from autumn to spring. The processes of metamorphosis, gestation, and the dormancy of winter take time. And this is a time of waiting in between, a time of hiddenness, where deep, mysterious things are taking place, things we may never know about, but which are vital to the development of the new life. This time of waiting is the time when a seed has been buried in the ground, slowly germinating, before the new little plant pushes upward through the ground. It is the time of incubation of a child in the womb, and this time cannot be rushed. If it's cut short, it can have extremely detrimental effects on the life that is being incubated. We have to wait it out with patience, where we learn a deep trust that the processes will unfold with their own natural timing. Interestingly, this time when Jesus was in the tomb between his death and resurrection was the Sabbath, the day of rest. And these times of rest are times where nothing appears to be happening on the surface of things, like the stillness of a caterpillar that has entered the pupa stage before emerging as a butterfly. And so we need to learn to rest into the times of apparent nothingness and waiting, because these are vital for our inner transformation, where these deep and mysterious stirrings of God's life in us are taking place. As Isaiah 30 verse 15 says, in repentance and rest is your salvation, in quietness and trust is your strength. But these times of waiting are difficult because they're often times of darkness, lostness, and loneliness, where we feel like we're groping around in an unknown space and can no longer rely on the old theories or props which used to satisfy us, which used to give us a sense of knowing where we're going. And this is what the separation time has been about, dying to those old patterns and leaving them behind, even good ones that served us for a while. And going back to our old familiar ways would be like a caterpillar crawling back out of its cocoon, wanting to avoid the time of waiting, of hanging upside down in the darkness. But for us, if we can dare to remain there, it is a holy darkness, full of the unseen, mysterious movement of God in the soul. And it's not at all comfortable to remain in a place of non-resolution. And so very often in these times of darkness and uncertainty, we're tempted to force a kind of resolution, or we grasp onto any form of certainty we can find. Thomas Merton describes this temptation to run away from the darkness in this way. They will run away from the darkness and do the best they can to dope themselves with the first light that comes along. And Sue Monk Kidd writes about this in her own spiritual journey. I'd like to be rid of this darkness, to unwrap the cocoon, get busy, do something to take my mind off my suffering, latch onto some easy neon answer that will camouflage the shadows. But I have the sense lurking inside that there's a mystery unfolding in the darkness that can't come any other way. Bright wings don't just happen. They require the courage to let go and spin the chrysalis. In soul-making, we can't bypass the cocoon. Wherever there are bright new wings, there's always the husk of waiting somewhere in the corner. So beautifully written. So for any kind of true transformation and flourishing to take place, individually and collectively, we have to go through these times of waiting in the non-resolution and darkness, and to find ways of navigating through these unknown times. Sue Monk Kidd goes on to write, the darkness is part of the trip. Too many of us panic in the dark. We don't understand that it's a holy dark and that the idea is to surrender to it and journey through to real light. She went on to write, "Crisis, change, all the myriad upheavals that blister the spirit and leave us groping. They aren't voices simply of pain, but also of creativity. And if we would only listen, we might hear such times beckoning us to a season of waiting, to the place of fertile emptiness." I love that phrase, fertile emptiness. Waiting is a time where God is stirring deep within our souls, where we are being formed by God as a child is in the womb, in ways that are too deep to understand or control. Suman writes, "Suspended upside down in the heart of the question, we touch the sacred spaces of real becoming." But this is not a time of passivity, of shrugging our shoulders helplessly and absently getting on with our usual daily grind until things start getting better. The invitation is to find ways to participate in the process, to collaborate with grace. Meister Eckhart wrote, "God has sowed God's own image, the seed of the divine nature within us. If the seed had a good, wise, and industrious cultivator, it would thrive and grow up into God." And so we need to learn to participate in this growth process, to become industrious, wise, and good cultivators, to provide a conducive environment in which growth can take place, so that we enable the seed of God within us to take root and grow up into God. So how do we do this? How do we participate in this becoming? Instead of checking out of the discomfort in our lives or distracting ourselves, trying to avoid the discomfort, the invitation is to bring a presence and attentive awareness to our lives and to our inner difficulties. Contemplative practices such as centering prayer or meditation are powerful during these times, because they involve the choice to be present, open, and awake within our lives as they are, opening to the divine presence and action within. They also involve letting go and surrendering all that our mind conjures up, surrendering into this mysterious presence and work of God. To quote Sue Monk Kidd again, she describes this as turning ourselves upside down so that everything is emptied out and God can flow in. It's curling up in the fogged spaces of the listening heart, sinking into solitude, wrapping the soul around some little flame of hope that God has ignited. It's sitting on the windowsill of the heart, still and watching. Such interior postures are themselves the prayers that transform, heal, and yield the answers in our waiting. And so we gradually learn to trust the silence and the waiting, even the silence of God. We learn to attune our inner ears to the more subtle stirrings of God in our lives, to weave these postures of the heart, letting go of our own answers and instead trusting the mysterious unknownness of God's work within us. Part of the work is also to let go of our old knowing of how it should be, how it should have worked out, and open to the possibility of new life in some different form, for something fresh and surprising to emerge. And as I've journeyed with silence, I've discovered that the strange thing about silence is that it becomes its own reward. As we entrust ourselves to the mystery, to the unseen, unfelt eternal embrace, a subtle but sure sense of renewal, foundness, freedom, and belonging starts to bloom in our inner beings. And these would be clouded by the very resolution we've been grasping for. Thomas Merton wrote, "When they stay quiet in the muteness of naked faith, resting in a simple and open-eyed awareness, attentive to the darkness which baffles them, a subtle and indefinable peace begins to seep into their souls and occupies them with a deep and inexplicable satisfaction. What is it? 'Tis hard to say, but one feels that it is somehow summed up in the will of God, or simply God." In the surrender of waiting in silence, the demands that our small, constricted selves place on God gently give way to an opening into our true selves, one with God. We find ourselves in a spaciousness that is vibrantly and generatively alive, with a deep and profound peace that is beyond understanding. And this is the promise of Revelation 21 verse 5, speaking into our own time, here and now. Behold, I am making all things new. Amen.